Photoshop gives you the tools you need to take your worst looking photo and make it look good. In fact, a lot of professional photographers use Photoshop to crop out bad places and otherwise clean up their photos before presenting them to their customers. In this lesson, we're going to learn photo retouching techniques that you'll be able to use with just a few clicks of the mouse. First, we're going to talk about the red eye tool. As you can see here, the bird in this image has a very red eye. It makes it really an unappealing photo. But the red eye tool will allow you to fix this problem. And the red eye tool is grouped over with the spot healing brush in your toolbox. And using the red eye tool is probably one of the simplest things you can do in Photoshop. So first, go up to your options bar and set your pupil size and set the amount you want to darken. I have it set pretty high because you can see the eye is really red there. And also because the pupil of the eye is fairly big, I've also set my pupil size fairly large. Next, you simply click on the problem area. And voila, just like that, the red eye is gone. Moving on to the clone stamp tool. The clone stamp tool will allow you to clone an area of an image and place it somewhere else on that image. Now, an example of when you might want to use this, here's that picture of a lizard we saw in an earlier lesson where the background is missing. The clone tool is a perfect way to fill in those background pieces. So click on the clone stamp tool and then adjust your brush size. Next, specify how you want to align the sample pixels. If you check aligned, this samples pixels continuously and doesn't lose the current sampling point, even if you release the mouse button. And sample samples from only the layers that you specify. You should also adjust your opacity. If I want to completely replace the background here, I probably want my opacity at 100%. But sometimes if you don't want to completely replace things, you'll set a lower opacity. So now, to start cloning, hold down the Alt key and click on the area you want to copy. I want to copy the background, so I'm going to click there. And then you start clicking on the areas that you want to replace. And you may have to re-click and sample. You can see I started getting some of the lizard's leg in there. So I'll want to Alt-click again to sample a new image. And I can continue to use that cloning tool to refill in my background. Now let's talk about the spot healing tool. That's also grouped over here. Click on spot healing. You'll use the spot healing brush tool to remove blemishes or other imperfections from images. To use it, you'll simply click on the tool and then press your mouse button down as you move it over the area of the image that you want to repair. And the spot healing brush tool will sample pixels near that area to fix your image. Like with everything else, before you use the spot healing tool, you'll want to set your options. And we've gone over all of these options before, except for the type. For the type, you can either choose proximity match, content aware, or create texture. Proximity match will make repairs using the closest surrounding pixels. Create texture will create a texture based on the pixels you're repairing, and content aware will synthesize nearby content. So let's look at how that works. I'm going to stick with the content aware. If we zoom in here, there's a few little things around her eyes that I don't want there, and a few stray hairs that I would prefer not to have in the picture. So I'm going to click on my healing brush, adjust my brush size, and then I'm going to click on the areas I want to fix. And using the content aware, it uses the areas around the image and it simply makes them disappear so that that image is nice and cleaned up. Now if I revert back, those spots appear. Let me show you proximity match, what that does. Same thing, uses the nearby areas. Now you can see it looks a little bit different there than what it did when using the content aware. Let's revert back again and create texture. You can see it kind of fuzzes it out and makes it a little bit gray in that area. So we may not like that one. It really varies depending on what image you're correcting, so play around with those options until you find the one that works the best for you. Now the healing brush tool is also grouped with the spot healing brush tool. It's very similar, but the only difference is that with the healing brush tool, you get to pick the pixels that you want to sample, and then use that to repair the image. So to use the healing brush tool, start by selecting your preferences in the options bar. Select your brush size and the mode. And then select the source. Sampled will use pixels sampled from the image, and pattern uses a pattern of pixels that you can select from the drop-down box. So if you wanted to fill with a pattern, you could choose one there. You would click Aligned if you wanted to sample pixels continuously, even if you release the mouse button. Choose the sample you want to use, and you can choose whatever layer you want to sample pixels from. We only have one layer here, so that's the layer it would use. When you're ready to use the healing brush, click in an area in the image that you want to use as a sample, and you'll press Alt-click. So if I wanted to use this area as a sample, Alt-click, and then I can click to use that area to heal the picture. So this can be a really fun tool to use because it also would let you completely remove things from the picture if you wanted. Say, for example, if I didn't want her whiskers there in the picture, I could use that tool again. Click the image that I want to sample and paint right over those. Just like that, those whiskers are gone. Another fun tool to use is the patch tool. And the patch tool will let you repair an area with pixels from another area or pattern, and it's grouped over here with the spot healing brush tool. To use the patch tool, click on it and then drag your mouse over the image to outline the area of the image that you want to repair. So for example, if I decided I didn't want this little prairie dog in the picture with the rest because he's not facing forward, I'd simply click, drag around him, and then go up to my options bar and make sure that source is selected. Next, you click around the area that you want to use to repair the image. So I can take a sample from these rocks, and I want to keep it relatively the same size as the first area I selected. And then click Destination. Then you simply drag the destination to the area that you want to repair. You can see that Photoshop automatically blends it there, and our little prairie dog is gone. You can also use the Color Replace tool, which is grouped with the Brush tool. Now I've gone ahead of time and selected the area that I want to replace the colors on. When you use the Color Replacement tool, the new color you select will blend with the existing color. So first you'll select the brush size and the mode. And then you'll select if you want continuous sampling to sample once or to use a background swatch by selecting the respective icon. So continuous will continuously sample colors as you drag. Sample once will use the first color you click as the sample. And sampling a background swatch will only replace areas that contain the current background color. Next, you'll set your limits. Discontiguous will erase the sample color wherever it occurs under the brush. Contiguous will erase areas of the sample color that are connected together. And Find Edges will erase the connected areas that contain the sampled color, but it will also preserve the sharpness of the edges. Next, you'll select a value for tolerance. A lower level will replace with colors very similar to the ones you've clicked, and a higher number gives a broader range of colors. And you'll click Anti-Alias if you want the edges smoothed. Then you can choose the color you want to use, and then from there you click and paint, and you can add in your new color. So I've replaced the color there with my new one without getting rid of the detail in the flower. However, if I decided I don't like the way that looks, I can also use the History Brush tool to get rid of that. But in order to use the History Brush tool, we'll also need to see the History panel. To access this, go to Window, History, and then that pops up here. The History Brush tool works much the same as the brush tool, except now you're going to select a state that you want to paint using the History panel, and then paint it on. To select a state, click on the empty box beside the state, and then start painting on your image. So I'm going to click on my history brush tool, and then I can paint back my original color. Now let's talk about the content-aware patch. Earlier in this course we learned about the content-aware fill. It's a great tool for filling in space on an image so it blends with the rest of the photo. However, if there's not a pattern in the image for Photoshop to use, it can fill in with content that doesn't match. The content-aware patch lets you determine which area of the image you'll use for the fill. So for example, in this image here, let's remove part of that. And we'll just replace that with the background color. So now we've got this blank spot here. Now Photoshop, if we used the content-aware fill on that, would likely fill in with more of these little buds here. But what if we decided that we'd rather fill it with more flowers? This is where the content-aware patch comes in handy. So click on the patch tool again, and in the mode, change that to content-aware. Now for adaptation, here's where you choose a value for how close the patch will reflect the existing image patterns. I'll keep that on medium. For sample all layers, you can enable this option to create the result of the move in another layer. Just select the target layer in the layers panel. We only have one layer for our image. So let's bring our space back there. We've got the area selected that we would like to use the patch tool on. Next, you're going to drag the selection over the area that you want to use as fill. I want to use flowers as fill. Release that, and at first it will look exactly like the extending selection, but once you release it, Photoshop will start using the content-aware fill to blend that with the background. As you can see, it's a little more blended now. From there, you could use some of the other tools that we talked about to fill in those other areas and make it match even better. You can also move content from one location in an image to another by using the Content-Aware Move tool. Content-Aware will fill in the background left behind from the moved image for you. So you would select the Content-Aware Move tool from the toolbox, and it's grouped with our other correcting tools here. Go up to the options bar and make sure your mode is set to Move. The adaptation and sample all layers settings are the same as for the content patch tool. Now select the area that you want to move. And then drag it where you want to place it or move it to. As you can see, it removed it from that area, filled in our new background, and now it's over here. Another fun tool is the Puppet Warp tool. You can use this to tweak and edit images or aspects within an image. You could use it, for example, to change the position of a trunk on an elephant or make a flower look wilted. So in this picture, I'd like to take the antler on this elk and play around with that a little bit. So first I've taken the pen tool and I've selected the area that I want to work with. This involves precision, so it can take some time, so just take your time with that until you've got it selected the way you want. And make sure that you've created a closed path, which means that it goes all the way around and connects. Now you'll right-click on your path and click Make Selection. This dialog box will open. Make sure the radius is set to 0 and then click OK. Now you can see it's turned into a selection. Next, click on the Marquee tool and go to the options bar and click on the Refine Edge button. And you learned a little bit about this dialog box already when you learned to select items. Go to the Output section and change the output to New Layer with Layer Mask. And adjust whatever other options you want there. Then click OK. You can see down here that you now have 2 layers. So if we click the eye icon on our background layer, we can see that that antler has been separated out. If we want to change the way that looks, make sure that layer is selected, and then go up to Edit, Puppet Warp. Now you can see what it's done to our selection here. It's created a sort of mesh over our image. And our mouse pointer, as you can see, is turned into a push pin. We can use that to create new points. So click along that mesh and you can create new points for the areas that you want to change and warp with our puppet warp. If I decided I only wanted to change this top part, I'd go all around there, make sure I've got a good selection. From there, you can click and warp that antler however you want to. And when you're done warping, click the check mark and that applies your warp. Now, this is where some of these other tools we've learned about will come in handy as well. You can see my warped image by itself looks like this now, but I've still got my background layer here. So if I wanted my new warped selection to be there, but not the bottom layer, I could click on the background, use one of the other tools we learned about, for example, the patch tool. Select that antler area that I want gone. Drag that until I have just the grass. And now all I can see is the newly warped antler.